I hope you will be interested in what I have. But I will talk this afternoon. Can you all hear me? Oh, maybe I have to change something. Yeah, this is better, I think. I would like to discuss something about what I think emerging technologies are doing to information, and also what we can do about that, what we are willing to do about that. I called it Unformation in the era of hyperconnectivity because I think connectivity is a very important factor that is changing a lot in the world of information, not exactly to data, but to information. First, on a high level, I would discuss some regulations in the field of data protection, because that's one way of approaching information and trying to protect information. Is the legal way to do that. We have the safe harbor regulation, which now will be replaced by the data shield regulation, and but the data shield regulation does not limit the collection and the retention of data. And also there are questions to the enforcement of the regulations. So it could be said that it's not a strong regulation to protect data. In Europe we have the General Data Protection Regulation. And as part of that, there's a data breach notification, an obligation to notify. And so also security and pseudonymization and encryption are an obligation as part of that regulation. So that's, I think, a great thing to protect data. But the question is how will organizations comply with this regulation, and how can we enforce it, the compliance? Because it has also to do with governance, with IT governance. And if you do not know that you're doing things wrong, the wrong way, then you cannot notify anybody about you are doing it the wrong way. So it's it is something, but it's not complete. It's not perfect. In the Netherlands, we also have a proposal for a new law for the intelligence services, and in a nutshell, the regulation says, well, okay, we will continue to tap the internet, and we will do so even more. When you look at the budget, we will increase the tapping of the internet from 15 million in 2017 to 35 million euros in 2019. And well, that's only about money, which is of course not unimportant, it's an indicator. But also apart from that, the technologies will improve. So in fact, these numbers tell me that the interception will raise by like a factor 3 or 4 at least. So of course this has to be done in accordance with other regulations, but also it is clear that intelligence services do not always comply with these regulations, and in some cases that may go unnoticed. Well, in the air traffic between the US and Europe, we have the passenger name record regulation. Still, this regulation has vague definitions about what data may be collected and or must be collected and not, and what the duration of the storage is. And as for the effectiveness of the collection of the data, there is no obligation to share the data with the member states, and that of course may harm the effectiveness. Also, you may have names on the list, but then when there are pseudonyms or false identities on board, or people who are somehow manipulating their identity, they will go unnoticed this way. Well, this is all about regulations, and hopefully they are kept. But also in the case with the iPhone in the US, we have seen that the US has asked for the encryption to be broken. But they didn't manage soon enough, so they just asked Israeli company to break the encryption, and they succeeded. So the regulations are maybe effective, but only to a certain extent. And if you have enough power and enough money, or a combination of the two, then you can always break one way or another the regulations. The regulations are all about data protection, so data protection from a point of view of the current and past state of technology. The Netherlands Scientific Council for Government Policy has noticed that, and they said that the current legal framework works for the, in particular for the intelligence services, focus on the collection and sharing of data, but they should be supplemented by new standards for the analysis and use of data in big data processes. And of course that's a very serious problem, because in access controls we always talked about discrete sets of information, whereas in big data analysis there are new sets of information created. And that's a special field, a special subset of information that is to be protected. Well, then I would like to talk briefly about society. This is a conference on technology, but I think technology has a great impact on society these days. And I would like to say something about surveillance versus secretive society. Well, in fact, I think surveillance societies will often be very secretive societies. Well, I don't have to explain to you what surveillance is. Apart from that, I think we must be aware of the fact that we are exposing ourselves on social media, etc. So we are a willing prey, so to say. Secretive society has to do with the fact that in the cyber world it's easy to hide, and there are many places where you can act unseen, and or even you yourself will be invisible. Now, why is that so important to say? It has not only to do with criminality, it has also to do with the type of society we live in. We have seen in the 20th century that archives have been, well, maybe the core instrument of totalitarian regimes, both for Nazi and Stasi regimes. And this was only paper, and there was no big data analysis on this, on these archives. Only small data analysis, so to say, very, very slow, very, very limited in scope. Now, the question is, what do all the new technologies we have with big data analysis, with exposure through social media, with exposure through the Internet of Things, the emerging Internet of Things, what will they do to our society? I do have the question, I don't have the answer, but I really want to be aware of it and to have it as part of the discussion in the world of IT security and data protection. Now, I found this word, information. Information, the word information, in my opinion, has to do with the fact that in data analytics we generate new information. And new information can also mean that information that beforehand was not personalized, you can, when you start with not personalized information, then you can end up with personalized information. So data analytics are very intrusive, and also the volume of the information is increasing exponential. Apart from the fact that the information is growing exponential, there's hyperconnectivity, so all the data will be available almost everywhere, and they will be kept for long periods of times. So there will be no unknown fact or place left, maybe in the end. Why do we collect all this data? Why do we analyze this? Well, we are acting on a number of dilemmas, and a few of the important dilemmas have to do with need to know versus need to share. We want to share in order to make the world more secure. We want to pay the price of privacy because we want to be safe. And in the case of the attacks of 9/11, it was concluded that the intelligence services in the United States had to share information, and then from that information somehow it caused WikiLeaks and similar things to happen. But even more important, I think, is that what I already said is that I started with the fact that in data analytics we end up with more information, that the output is greater than the input. The volume of information is greater than the input. And then William Binney, who is an ex-NSA analyst, I think, he is a whistleblower, as a matter of fact, and he says we are not only that we are collecting so much data, but also on top of that we analyze this data, and the volume of information we are generating causes us to be ends up in no information at all. So an overdoses of information somehow turns into no information at all. And he says that that causes a great danger because we act as if we know everything, whereas in fact maybe we do not so much, or even we do know nothing, or we know the wrong thing. So the question is, we want to know, we want to have information, but we also have to know where to stop knowing, because otherwise it will be ineffective or counterproductive. So I found this picture of psilocybin. And then you may ask, what is psilocybin? I didn't know that either, but it's what is called paddo's in the Netherlands. It's a type of drug. And on the left hand you see the state of nerves when people do not use paddo's. And on the right you see the state of the nerves and the brain when they do use paddo's. So you see that the connectivity is much, much more higher. And yeah, it's a metaphor, so to say. I use it as a metaphor to think about what can happen to society when we have too much connections. It may feel great to some persons to use paddo's, but in fact, I think we will end up not with information, but with information. Well, also, I found out this word and then I looked it up, and then some other people have invented this word as well. So, but typically, Oscar Wilde, for example, says, you've got it wrong, and that's what it's all about, information. Now, what challenges are we facing with regards to the things I have discussed? Of course, one important point is democratic governance, not only governance in terms of technology, but also democratic governance. So people who are involved in politics, etc., they should understand what's going on and should be able to anticipate on it. Also, we need some sort of balance of powers in terms of access to information and also the powers of comprehension. By the last thing I mean that in this field it's often difficult to make accurate policies because the policymakers cannot dive deep into the bits and bytes in order to find out what's going on. So. But in fact, somebody should and then make a valid policy, valid in terms of democracy. Then we have some technological challenges. We should strive for a balanced application of technologies. The cyber intelligence and cybersecurity intelligence should keep with the cyber arms race, what they call cyber arms race, and data protection should keep pace with cyber intelligence. So, and I think on a very high level, when talking about data protection and information security, etc., we should strive for stronger mimicry with the world of attackers. So we need emerging technologies which are threatening us, and we should use the same technologies in order to protect ourselves. And also, last but not least, we need some robust cyber infrastructure, and I think there are some things in particular with regard to the World Wide Web that can be improved. And I will not go into details about that, but now when we look at the concept of information and the intrusion of privacy and all these things that are going on, when we look at the regulation, the Dutch regulation for the intelligence services, one thing that has been said is that they really need great powers to collect all sorts of data, not only focusing on particular individuals or groups or something, but more generic powers. The reason for that has been that the services say, okay, most of the time we do not know who is acting on the internet because people were doing something wrong in our perception, they will be using pseudonyms, or they will be anonymous or something like that. So for that reason, we could somehow try and look at the identity infrastructure on the web. And my suggestion is that blockchain technology might be of help there. And if somebody is interested in discussing that with me in greater detail, I would like that very much. And when we have a stronger infrastructure, then intelligence services would be able to focus more on individuals who are a risk or groups who are a risk. And then in terms of retention, they should also be able to decide which information they have to keep and which information that can be thrown away after 1 day or 1 week or something. And also, when you have an identity infrastructure, a stronger identity infrastructure, then you could filter. Well, in fact, implicitly I said it already. You can somehow filter information and then throw everything away that is not relevant anymore very fast after analysis. That's it. Thank you. If there are any questions or remarks, you may say so. Yeah.
Can you say anything more about how you would use blockchain for identity, and is it easy for the ones who don't want to be in it to stay out of it?
I can say something. I'm not an expert in blockchain technology. That's what I start with. But I understand cryptography in terms of what can I use it for. Now, I've been thinking about, on a high level, I do understand what blockchain is. And here's, of course, some sort of example. In every block, information is stored. And then, within a block, the information is encrypted, but not only in itself, but in connection with a preceding block or preceding blocks. So that means that if I take a block out of it, I have to approach the information set in connection with each other. If I want to decrypt and change the information in a legitimate way. So what we see in identity management, we have the problem of source documents or source information, which means that when I go to a forger, I can say, okay, give me a birth certificate, give me a passport, give me something to prove that I am not who I am, but somebody else. Then, if it's a good forger, then he will do that, and they will pay, and then here I am, just a new person. The model here, the advantage of the blockchain model is that no set of information stands on its own. So you always need some sort of source or root or something to go back to in order to proceed. So everything is connected, so you cannot just say I take one element out of the chain and then falsify it, because you have to go back to the chain somehow. That's why this algorithm can strengthen, in principle, identity management in general, not only for internet or for IT applications, but also for national governments to define or register the identities of their citizens. Okay? Okay. Thank you.